Mick Foley destroying his body for entertainment. This is a requested reaction, by the way, so I know this is going to be really good. So let's watch. Man. What is this video
April
finna show
2nd,
me?
2006. About halfway through the 4-hour biggest show of the year, while the
Lord,
outside of the Chicago All-State Arena would be covered with lights, flashy signs, and marquees that plastered the words WrestleMania 22, the inside of the arena would be littered with broken weapons, burning skin, and fans in awe of faces and bodies covered in blood. And within this mess lay one man in particular, a man who, although he may have lost the match, managed to win over the hearts of fans on this night and on many nights before by continuously giving his all to the sport he loved, by making his name synonymous with the word hardcore. This man was Mick Foley. On this night, Foley entered the match with a 42-year-old overworked body that had up to this point suffered a broken toe, a broken wrist, a ripped off ear, a twice broken nose, 2 herniated discs, 4 knocked out front teeth, 5 broken ribs, 8 concussions, and a dozen more breaks, tears, and fractures. Yet despite these physical limitations, he was determined to put on the match of the night. And did he ever? In the sport of professional wrestling, it's not only the winners who garner the love of the fans. Viewers now understand that what it takes to make a good match is the in-ring relationship between both the winner and the loser, and the sacrifices that the loser must make to ensure that the winner looks like a complete force to be reckoned with. This is called putting over a wrestler, and by enduring decades of pain and torture in the ring, this is something that Mick Foley has been doing since his debut, all in the name of respect for the wrestling business. Mick Foley entered the world of professional wrestling with a body type that some would say is unconventional for wrestlers of his time. He traded in the bulging biceps and the perfect abs for messy hair, a slight slouch, and a crooked smile. But even in 1983, at the age of 18, his physical appearance meant nothing when considered alongside his passion and determination. The same passion that had him making 6-hour drives from his New York college campus to his wrestling school in Pennsylvania. This is where his skill set began to match his passion under the tutelage of Dominic Danucci, a tenured legend with global experience who had a multitude of styles to teach his students at the time. Eventually, this determination would land him small on-screen matches for the WWF, where he would quickly be squashed by more established wrestlers. This is where his penchant for pain and injury began, when in one of these squash matches, he faced the Dynamite Kid, a wrestler known for going off script and throwing stiff punches at the new guys as a form of initiation, instead of the typical performance punches that look much more painful than they actually are. It was one of these stiff punches that injured Foley so drastically that he wasn't able to eat solid food for several weeks. After this short stint in the WWF, he toured different independent promotions until landing in world-class championship wrestling, where he went by the name Cactus Jack. Under this moniker, Mick Foley would become notorious for dangerous feats such as being on the receiving end of stiff strikes and delivering top rope elbows onto the concrete floor. After witnessing his love of high-risk danger in the form of a 12-foot elbow drop onto fellow wrestler Kevin Sullivan, Ric Flair, who was the WCW booker at the time, along with Kevin, decided to offer Mick Foley his first ever full-time contract. A contract that came right at the time when he was having massive financial struggles due to traveling from promotion to promotion, chasing his dreams. It was during this time that Foley gained his distinct look of the missing front teeth, but surprising to many wrestling fans, this wasn't a moniker gained from in-ring damage. Foley was actually involved in a car crash at this time that took 2 of his eventual 4 missing front teeth, a look he was more than happy to keep so as to help him live up to his extreme gimmick. It was at this point that Foley would once again dabble in smaller promotions like UWF and TSW, where violence would become even more embedded into his style. During this run, Foley would become the innovator of a weapon that American audiences weren't yet used to: barbed wire. Whether it was hanging wrestlers using the wire or participating in matches where the ring ropes were wire, Foley became synonymous with the spike-covered, stringy substance. This was the birth of the Maniac stint of Cactus Jack, a rebirth version of his former self, which made its way back to WCW, where he began to use his signature phrase, "bang bang," as he laughed hysterically. Although debuting as a heel, this eventually made him a fan favorite, which pushed him further into main event feuds. But one of the most memorable feuds of this time was with Big Van Vader, a wrestler so well known for stiff strikes that he was at a point in his career when many wrestlers would refuse to work with him, out of fear of actually being physically injured. But to no surprise, news like this only excited Foley more, and he jumped at the opportunity to work with Vader, making this one of his most vicious feuds up to this point. During their second match together, Foley was scripted to become injured at a certain point, but he wanted this injury to feel as real as possible for the fans. So although most ringside activities always use protective mats to shield the possibility of real injury, for this match they decided against it, so fans can feel the true impact of the bumps. However, Vader's powerbomb to the unpadded concrete floor actually gave Foley a legitimate concussion and even caused him to lose feeling in his left leg momentarily. To make matters worse, months later after recovering from this injury, Foley went right back to his feud with Vader in what WCW called a Texas death match. A match so brutal that steel chairs, steel posts, and steel steps were only some of the more typical.
Bro, I did not know about all these different injuries, bro. Like how he took this shit. He got so many injuries and came back and did more. Like, and then you look at him, he looks like he's enjoying it. Like it doesn't faze him. Like I can't even talk. Trying to like make sense of it. Like, bruh.
Weapons used, while cameras, pre-dug graves, and even tasers were uniquely utilized as weapons until both men were beaten to a bloody pulp. Though this must have been a physically demanding experience for both men involved, it proved to make great TV. So 6 months later, although the two men were now banned from ever putting on a televised show again due to their brutality, they decided to have a house show instead. And it was one that actually ended up being their most legendary matches to date. It was here that the two men attempted to pull off a hung in between two ropes as he dangled ringside. However, what these men didn't know was that the ropes were actually applied extra tight that night, and Foley found it impossible to move as he was being choked out. When he finally freed himself, the friction of the rope he had to scrape through to survive left a massive split on his ear that had left a third of it hanging off his face. In the spirit of the show must go on, the two men continued trading blows until Vader eventually ripped the piece of the ear completely off, a piece that the referee would then pick up and hand to the ring announcers, becoming one of the most horrific sights in professional wrestling to this day. Shortly after this, Foley then ran through numerous stints in SMW, IWA, and ECW, bringing his signature style of brutality everywhere he went. Many of these matches began to involve things like bricks, body bags, thumbtacks, flaming chairs, flaming iron rods, and of course, barbed wire. An especially vicious series of matches was known as the King of the Deathmatch tournament at Kawasaki Dream in Japan, which was an all-day event that started early in the day and only got more and more brutal as it went on into the night. This show drew a crowd of 28,757 attendants, which was the largest crowd ever for an IWA Japan show. The first round of the tournament started in the daytime and was a barbed wire baseball bat and thumbtacks match, which Foley won. He then went on to win the semi-final match, which was a barbed wire board and spike nail match. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more inhumane, nightfall came. And along with it came the tournament main event, which was a barbed wire rope exploding barbed wire boards and exploding ring time bomb death match, which proved to be as hard to watch as it was to say. Yet no one in the attendance could look away. It was a complete bloodbath for the two men involved, with Foley suffering extreme pain from the mixture of cuts from the barbed wire along with the second-degree burns from the C4 explosions. To make matters worse, he also had to endure these burns during his 14-hour flight back to America the next day. Recently, Foley had stated that for this entire event, he had only been paid $300. This is why it was a relief that shortly after, Foley had been signed to a full-time contract with the WWF, one of the top promotions at the time. Due to years of mutilation and damage, Foley already wasn't looking too good at this point, so WWF head Vince McMahon, because he's putting on a fucking show. So instead of debuting as the infamous Cactus Jack, he came in as Mankind, a leather mask wearing, mentally unstable psychopath, known for dwelling in boiler rooms and speaking to a rat named George, pulling out his hair and randomly screaming mommy during matches. During his early years as Mankind, Foley once again began performing in brutal matches, such as buried alive matches, steel cage matches, dumpster matches, and the infamous boiler room brawl, a match created as a result of Mankind's penchant for lurking around in the boiler room. But
and before anybody get my comments talk about, how do you not know this? Because I know there's going to be somebody that's just going to be like, how do you not know? I did not grow up during this era. So a lot of this shit I did not see and I did not know. I only know like surface level things that were shared. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of us know who Cactus Jack is, Mankind. We knew how Foley put himself through all these like different crazy shit things to be as entertaining as he is. And I only know a little piece of him through WWF, but like before, you know, WWF or whatever, and WWE, I didn't know any of this. Like the ear being ripped off by the ropes or whatever. Oh my god. And then the referee, that shit just, that sounds insane. Like that doesn't even sound like something that would happen in a wrestling match, you know. But the shit that he was doing before, I guess like mainstream wrestling, I guess you would call it, I don't know, sounds like some backyard shit, you know what I mean? Like, let's set up barbed wires in the ring and fucking set the ring on fire, and let's fight to the death, and let's rip each other apart. Like, that sounds insane.
But the most infamous of these specialty matches,
like, I've seen crazy shit during wrestling, during matches, but this is like a whole nother level.
Was his 1998 Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, which is one of the most iconic matches in wrestling history. This match became known for its high level of danger and its low levels of precaution. When planning the match, Mick Foley had pitched the idea of starting off the bout with him being thrown off the top of the cage, then climbing back up and being thrown off again. Undertaker, his opponent for the match, replied with, "Mick, do you want to die?" Foley replied, "We've got a heck of a legacy to live up to, and I don't want this match to ruin it." And they definitely lived up to it by following through with Foley's absurd pitch of Undertaker throwing him 16 feet off the top of the cell, crashing through the wooden announcer's table and landing on the concrete floor. And just as he planned, less than 5 minutes later, with a dislocated shoulder, he climbed back to the top, only to later be chokeslammed through the top panel of the cell. The additional fall was actually not part of the initial plan and resulted in Foley losing both a tooth and the match. Years later, the referee for the match, Tim White, said that although he was aware of the planned spots, he still felt like he was having a heart attack throughout the whole match. A feeling I'm sure everyone could relate to, as the lasting image of this match being a bloodied Mick Foley laying on the mat as his tooth hung out of his nose. Although this was a loss, a feeling that Foley was more than used to at this point, this match may still be the spark that ignited his rise to main event status. The Mankind character then became more liked and lighthearted instead of unstable and dangerous.
I'm sorry, hold on.
The fans got back known for dwelling in boiler room. Don't want this match to ruin it. And they definitely lived up to it by following through with Foley's absurd pitch of Undertaker throwing him 16 feet off the top of the cell, crashing through the wooden announcer's table and landing on the concrete floor. And just as he planned, less than 5 minutes later, with a dislocated shoulder, he climbed back to the top, only to later be chokeslammed through the top panel of the cell. The additional fall was actually not part of the initial plan and resulted in Foley losing both the tooth and the match. Years later, the referee for the match, Tim White, said that although he was aware of the planned spots, he still felt like he was having a heart attack.
I thought that was a pin. I thought maybe like a pin was stuck in his skin or some shit. Like, you know, no, that was his tooth. That's why I wanted to go back. I thought it was one of those pins. Like, that's like I can't wrap my mind around this shit. That was his tooth, and he kept going. Oh my god.
Whole match. A feeling I'm sure everyone could relate to, as the lasting image of this match being a bloodied Mick Foley laying on the mat as his tooth hung out of his nose. Although this was a loss, a feeling that Foley was more than used to at this point, this match may still be the spark that ignited his rise to main event status. The Mankind character then became more liked and lighthearted instead of unstable and dangerous, and eventually, the fans got behind this change. This lovable gimmick was only further heightened when juxtaposed with the hated characterization of WWF owner Vince McMahon, who began working with The Rock to abuse and defile Mankind, although he looked up to McMahon. It was during this time that the wrestling industry was also going through a huge disruption, with the constant opposition between the industry's two leading promotions, WCW and WWF, both of which had their flagship shows on Monday nights at the same time. This was dubbed the Monday Night Wars, and up until this point, WCW had been winning for the most part. So after weeks of loss and brutalization from The Rock and McMahon, on the January 4th, 1999 episode, Mankind was finally scheduled to win the most prized title, the WWF Championship, a move that WCW executives got wind of due to pre-tapings. So in an attempt to maintain viewership, WCW did something that goes against all rules of professional wrestling. They spoiled the match ending. Mid-show, live live on WCW, the announcer Tony Schiavone revealed that Mankind would be winning, so that there was no need to even watch the WWF that night. However, this proved to be their biggest mistake. Immediately after the match result was revealed live on WCW, Nielsen ratings indicated that over 600,000 people switched over to WWF programming. This was monumental because it not only put WWF in the ratings lead for the Monday Night Wars, but it also showed that results on their own aren't what matters to wrestling fans. What matters is the ability to witness history being made with the characters we've watched grow and be a part of these sentimental moments that show us that anyone can achieve their dreams. From that point, WCW never surpassed WWE in the ratings, and Foley continued his must-see feud with The Rock, but this time as a world heavyweight champion. And this feud would culminate in a match that would require Mick Foley to do something he has never done in the ring: quit. The 1999 Royal Rumble I Quit match between Foley and The Rock had the especially savage stipulation of only being able to end once one participant said the words "I quit." And based on Foley's past of enduring brutalization, everyone wasn't sure that it would be impossible to make him say those words. During the match, not only did Foley take numerous hits with tables and ring bells in the ring, outside of it, and in the stands, not only did Foley take a 12-foot fall onto the live electrical equipment that sparked and caused lights to go out as he hit it, but what truly made this match one of the era's most brutal was The Rock's use of one weapon in particular: the steel chair. The steel chair has been a mainstay in professional wrestling since the 50s, so it was no surprise to see it in any match, much less a Mick Foley match. But the level of brutality that audiences witnessed that night goes beyond any way the steel chair had been utilized up to that point. Here's some steel chair ground rules. For starters, wrestlers would often put their hands in front of their head last minute to shield their skull from any true damage, but The Rock had Mick Foley handcuffed for a large portion of the match, so that was
ate them fucking chairs.
Secondly, the most chair shots a wrestler was allowed to take during a 10-minute match was 3. Within the span of 2.5 minutes, Foley had taken 11 unprotected chair shots directly to the head. This sight took an emotional toll on everyone in attendance. For the first time in Foley's risky career, the bloodthirsty fans that were regularly yelling for
"This is
more
making me so uneasy."
And leading the screams was Foley's wife and 5-year-old daughter, who was sat in the front row in tears, believing that the head of their household was about to die. Yet when given the final opportunity to say the words "I quit," Foley tiredly mumbled into the...
Oh my God. Now I'm talking about this is making me uneasy and uncomfortable. Can you imagine his family is the children are watching this? Oh my goodness. Hold on, y'all need a break. No reaction has ever made me have to take a break. This is crazy. This is crazy. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it. That's insane. I quit match. Wow.
Audiences witnessed that night goes beyond any way the steel chair had been utilized up to that point. Here's some steel chair ground rules. For starters, wrestlers would often put their hands in front of their head last minute to shield their skull from any true damage, but The Rock had Mick Foley handcuffed for a large portion of the match, so that was impossible. Secondly, the most chair shots a wrestler was allowed to take during a 10-minute match was 3. Within the span of 2.5 minutes, Foley had taken 11 unprotected chair shots directly to the head. This sight took an emotional toll on everyone in attendance. For the first time in Foley's risky career, the bloodthirsty fans that were regularly yelling for more were now yelling to stop. And leading the screams was Foley's wife and 5-year-old daughter, who was sat in the front row in tears, believing that the head of their household was about to die. Yet when given the final opportunity to say the words "I quit," Foley tiredly mumbled into the microphone, "You'll have to kill me." Although the plan finish had Foley looking into the eyes of his family and saying "I quit," he fell unconscious due to constant hits to the skull, leaving the officials backstage no choice but to play a previous recording of him saying "I quit" over the speakers, making Rock the winner. And although a stretcher was brought out for the bloodied and concussed Mick Foley, he refused it and walked out with his head high, content with the fact that he never actually quit, a pattern that we would see in both his matches and his career as a whole. For the next year and a half, Foley continued to be a staple in WWF programming due to his highly entertaining feuds and friendships with top wrestlers like Stone Cold, Triple H, and The Rock. But at this point, years of wrestling began to take a toll on his body, both physically and cognitively, with him beginning to forget simple bodily motions and forgetting how to write and spell basic words. He knew it was time to retire, so his last match was scheduled for November 1999, but it was at this point the wrestling world received the devastating news that Stone Cold Steve Austin, arguably the biggest star in wrestling at the time, would have to spend months away due to the severity of a neck injury that would eventually lead to his own retirement. So typical Mick Foley, the man who always put the fans first, became more concerned with fan reaction to losing two major superstars at once than he was with his own health. So he decided to continue wrestling for a few more months until Austin could begin making appearances again. When that time finally came, Foley wanted to go out on his own terms in a way the fans could remember him for decades to come. So what better way to do so than with the match that made him famous in the first place, the Hell in a Cell. With the stipulation that Foley would have to retire if he lost, he put on another fantastic bout against Triple H that included thumbtacks, flaming 2x4s, and yet again, barbed wire. But in the end, Foley was launched through the roof of the cage, much like he was years prior, falling 13 feet into the mat as Triple H pinned him to finally retire the legend. But if there's one thing we've learned about Foley, it's that he's a man who never knows when to quit, both in matches and in life. For the next 6 years, he continued to have on-screen appearances that involved little to no wrestling. But every time he did step back
this
into
is
the
what
ring,
I remember.
He knew it would only be to give back to the industry and performers that he loved his whole life.
This is the only time I saw him.
More than most his entire
when
life.
I started watching.
His true era of the giving back Mick Foley began in 2003, when he decided to begin a storyline with a young wrestler who was newer to the industry at the time, but has gone on to become a legend in his own right. A young Randy Orton was being pushed as one of the most deplorable wrestlers at the time by running through beloved legends that
3 years later, slow ass punch.
So in order to live up to the legend killer status, he began tormenting a legend that fans grew to adore by pushing Foley down a flight of stairs on June 23rd, 2003. After a lengthy feud that saw the return of The Rock at WrestleMania 20, it eventually culminated at the Backlash pay-per-view in 2004, where Foley brought Cactus Jack out one more time for a hardcore match that saw Orton utilizing Foley's signature barbed wire baseball bat in his own unique ways in order to win the match. To this day, Foley says this was one of the best matches of his career, and although this match did wonders to push Randy Orton's legend killer persona over the edge, there was still one more edge that Foley felt like he needed to conquer, and that came in the form of Adam Copeland, aka Edge, a wrestler who had already dominated in the middle of the card for years, but was recently given that main event push that he so deserved. If you thought Randy Orton was a top villain, Edge had been taking notes from the same book and magnifying them tenfold, so Foley knew that the perfect icing on the cake for Edge's already heated career would be a match against the greatest hardcore legend that would be one of the most intensely brutal bouts the WWE would see at the time. So let's take it back to where we started. A 42-year-old man with more injuries than titles. On April 2nd, he entered the WrestleMania arena with a body that had gone through bruises, breaks, fractures, tears, burns, and concussions. So the question on the mind of every fan was, does he have what it takes to do it one last time? Well, this was a man who was constantly winning over the hearts of fans by losing to some of the greatest, whether it was The Rock, Triple H, or Randy Orton. Foley made a career out of making other wrestlers look like stars, and this one was no different. Although there were many intense spots that utilized chairs, tables, and a plethora of thumbtacks, there was one planned spot that would be the magnum opus of the night: the spear from the inside of the ring onto a burning table outside. In order to convince management to let them do the spot, they had to do multiple pre-match tests, and even had plants in the crowd that were actually fire marshals just in case anything went awry. WWE officials even covered the wrestlers' entire bodies with flame retardant gel, but according to Edge, due to the large amounts of sweat from both nerves and strenuous activity, the gels washed off in about 2 minutes. This same gel was meant to be applied to the table as well, but at both performers' request, it was not. The final spot resulted in something that would take all fans out of their seats, as Edge and Foley went flying into a burning table.
It was not. They didn't want the gel on them? Oh, wow.
Losing to some of the greatest, whether it was The Rock, Triple H, or Randy Orton. Foley made a career out of making other wrestlers look like stars, and this one was no different. Although there were many intense spots that utilized chairs, tables, and a plethora of thumbtacks, there was one planned spot that would be the magnum opus of the night: the spear from the inside of the ring onto a burning table outside. In order to convince management to let them do the spot, they had to do multiple pre-match tests, and even had plants in the crowd that were actually fire marshals just in case anything went awry. story. WWE officials even covered the wrestlers' entire bodies with flame retardant gel, but according to Edge, due to the large amounts of sweat from both nerves and strenuous activity, the gels washed off in about 2 minutes. This same gel was meant to be applied to the table as well, but at both performers' request, it was not. The final spot resulted in something that would take all fans out of their seats, as Edge and Foley went flying into a burning table as it exploded into a dozen pieces of wood and ember. Both wrestlers suffered secondary burns as the camera did a close-up of Edge's traumatized face, which he later revealed was a completely real reaction to him smelling his own flesh being burnt. As both men lay over the rubble and chaos they had created, Edge shakily crawled over to Foley's unmoving body and laid his arm over him as the referee counted to 3, making Edge the winner of one of Foley's final matches with the WWE. At that moment, he lay on top of the legend. He whispered 4 words that every fan in attendance was probably either thinking, whispering, or yelling as well. I love you, Mickster. And typically, the always cheery, always happy Mick Foley did what he did best. He gave it right back by whispering.
That's how you put on a motherfucking show.
Words that were said to Edge, but were surely also meant for all the wrestlers, fans, and the industry that he gave his life to.
First of all, I don't debate. I don't get into debate. But if we get into a conversation of like who's your favorite wrestler, and you tell me your favorite wrestler is Mick Foley, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm not gonna debate you. No, not favorite, best. Who's the best wrestler? Who is your best wrestler? You tell me Mick Foley, I'm not finna debate you. I'm not finna argue with you. You got it. You won. Like I said, I did not know all of this detail, like his start. You're 42 years old and you put yourself through all of that. You go on the list of some of the scariest wrestlers. Because remember we did that reaction of like the most scary wrestlers, terrifying wrestlers or whatever. I don't think Mick Foley was on that list. To me, he's scary because you allow yourself to be put through all of that trauma, losing an ear, teeth getting fucked up, broken body parts, chair shots, burning tables, barbed wires, pins. You're scary. I'm not fucking with you. So that's, and then you come back for more? Like nothing happened? No, that's terrifying. So he got it, you know. I always knew about Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Mankind, all of that. But I never knew in detail of his run. You know, I only know what I know. So, you know, don't come for me in the comments because I know there are always people who love to like, oh my God, how did you not know this? But yeah, that's gonna do it for this reaction. Make sure to leave some likes and comments down below. And I will see y'all in the next one. Toodles.